يو 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 يو. مرحبا يا أهل نيجامان. هذا الأخ حصل على حلاقة شهوانية قلوانية نارية مجانية، ولمن يريد الحلاقة عندي ليرسل لي في الخاص. يا لا سيروا تحفظوا، راه عندكم الجهاوي والموحد ديال السادس. يا لا سيروا تقودوا.
The following is from a document read out loud during an urgent conference in the Imperial Japanese General Headquarters. It outlines Japan's grand strategy for defeating the United States.
我が大日本帝国は、米国、英国、オランダ、東アジアと西太平洋の要塞を滅ぼし、長期的な充足の準備をするために、重要な資源と大切な連絡回線を確保する。利用可能な用法を駆使し、米国艦隊の主な部分に対して、おとり作戦でふさわしい時間に攻撃し、壊滅させる。
I'm Griffin Johnson, the armchair historian, and today we'll be answering two questions. First, what was the primary motivation of Japan's decision to wage war on the Western powers, namely the United States? And second, how was that war fought? But first, I'm pleased. 3 years after the outbreak of the Second Sino-Japanese War, Japan invaded French Indochina in an effort to cut off Chinese supplies. It was an easy target. Germany had just finished their 46-day conquest of the French mainland. Shortly after, Japan took another gamble and allied itself with Germany and Italy by signing the Tripartite Pact. It is believed by some historians that the Japanese government hoped that the US would be intimidated into loosening its antagonistic stance on Japan as a result of Axis backing. In the following year, Japan began showing interest in the Dutch East Indies. In response to Japanese aggression, the US announced an oil embargo and froze Japanese assets being held in the US in July of 1941. The Imperial Japanese Navy predicted that they would be completely out of fuel in just 2 years as a direct result of the embargo. At this point, Japan arguably had no other option except to launch an aggressive succession of attacks on Malaya, and the Dutch East Indies, which would provide the oil, rubber, tin, and iron it would need to sustain itself in a protracted conflict. There was one issue. The Philippines were controlled by the United States, and if the invasion of British Malaya and Dutch East Indies provoked the US into waging war on Japan, the Philippine Islands could not only act as a crucial staging area for an invasion of Japan, but they could also block off any imports coming into the Japanese mainland. Therefore, planning for U.S. involvement would be required if the Japanese ever hoped to achieve their Pacific supremacy. The occupation of these three major territories would also allow the formation of a fortified defense perimeter, which the Japanese hoped would ward off any and all amphibious landings on the home islands in the case of British or American retaliation. In Showalter's words, Japan proposed to fight the Pacific War as it had fought China and Russia, limiting the conflict by escalating its material and moral costs beyond what the Western powers, America in particular, were willing to pay. The strategy was predicated not on American effeteness, but on American rationality. By 1940, the United States had formulated a plan of its own in case that war broke out in the Pacific. It was called Plan Dog, and it can be summed up with just two words: Germany first. The United States would focus its full attention on defeating Germany and concede the losses of the Philippines, Guam, and Wake Island. After Europe was in Allied control, the United States planned to retake its holdings in the Pacific and strike Japan itself. Soroku Yamamoto, the Japanese Marshal Admiral of the Navy during the Second World War, was responsible for planning an attack on Pearl Harbor, which Professors Tomoyuki Shizu and Raymond Callahan described as one of the most elaborate efforts to coordinate simultaneous attacks by aircraft and submarines. The attack commenced on the morning of December 7th, 1941. Tasked with destroying key U.S. air and naval targets, hundreds of dive bombers, torpedo bombers, and fighters filled the sky. Despite the logistical challenges of the raid, the Japanese succeeded in destroying 160 American aircraft, sinking 8 ships, 4 of which were battleships, damaging 10 others, and killing 2,335 American sailors. In Eyewitness Pacific Theater, Donald Stratton, one of the few soldiers who survived the explosion of the battleship Arizona, during the Pearl Harbor attack wrote that a fireball engulfed the whole foremast. Very few escaped from the bow of the ship. We were pretty burned. Our hands were just raw, and in the meantime, my fingernails had all come off. Admiral Yamamoto hoped that the attack would accomplish two things. One, damage American morale, and two, neutralize the U.S. Navy's material advantage. Although the American fleet was temporarily incapacitated, Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor when no U.S. aircraft carriers were in port, and so America was quick to recuperate from its losses. Still, the attack did provide Japan with a window of time to occupy Singapore, the Philippines, and the Dutch East Indies without much resistance. It's important to know that just before the attack on Pearl Harbor, unbeknownst to the rest of the world, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt approved the creation of the Manhattan Project, the purpose of which was to explore the military uses of the recently discovered phenomenon of nuclear fission. Whether they knew it or not, the Manhattan Project would be responsible for changing the course of world history forever, as we'll see towards the end of our video.
If you think